welcome to a special edition of the Thrive for Life Live. I am talking to three amazing physicians and co-authors of the Made for More book, physician entrepreneurs who live life and practice medicine on their own terms. And I'm so excited to have these three ladies who are also our panelists today. So let me introduce them. We have Dr. Michelle Johnson, who wrote chapter 6 called Creating Abundance. And Dr. Johnson is a board certified physical medicine and rehabilitation, pain management, obesity management, lifestyle medicine physician. She is bordered in 4 areas. She is wonderful, and she believes in a comprehensive approach to patient care and health. Dr. Johnson is the founder of More Food, Less Medicine, and strives to help people with prediabetes and diabetes type 2 and reverses those conditions and improves their health using God's word. So welcome, Dr. Johnson. It's so good to have you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shelley. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, thank you. And next we have Dr. Rebecca Lauderdale. She wrote chapter 29, which is Entrepreneurship is an Act of Resistance. Dr. Lauderdale is a board certified internal medicine specialist who practiced primary care for medically complex adults in South Mississippi. Her podcast, Women Physicians Flourish, was born from her own experience of burnout and subsequent study of human flourishing. Her newest project is also a podcast called Belonging in the South, a guide for misfits with a mission to help Southerners find belonging and community while changing who they truly are. Welcome, Dr. Lauderdale. We're happy to have you.
So good to be here.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Whaley Gray. She's a board certified sleep integrative and lifestyle medicine physician who practices in Vermont. She also is a registered life planner and founder of Dare to Dream Physician, where she offers life planning and hosts a weekly podcast. Thank you so much, Dr. Gray, for coming on. So we're so happy to have all three of you guys coming today. And so I would like us just to come and just talk a little bit about the journey that led you to this life of physician entrepreneurship. Dr. Lauderdale, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. So I joined the EntreMD program in the summer of 2021. So we had just all been through that year of the pandemic, and there had, we were a few months into having vaccines, but things were still very restrictive. And I had, like many of us, with all of the sort of the extra time on my hands, had started to think about, was my life, was my practice, were the things that I was doing, the things that I really wanted to be doing, had I chosen them on purpose? And I accidentally happened on the Leverage and Growth Accelerator and the summit, what's it called? The summit that he had that Peter Kim has every year for physicians, for kind of like physician entrepreneurs. And Dr. Una was a guest speaker. And I was just fascinated with what she spoke about. And it really resonated with me, how she talked about how important it was that physicians be leaders, not only in their own practices and organizations, but in the community that they live in, that they be speakers, and that we have our voices out into the world. And so I sort of followed her, and I paid attention to what she was doing. And when she opened up her program that summer, I jumped at the chance to join. And, for me, what I really wanted to do was sort of get my voice out into the world and get a chance to connect with other people, because I felt very isolated. I felt like there were ways that my strengths and capabilities weren't really being recognized or used. And I wanted an opportunity for that. And so that's what got me started. Was Dr. Una's magnetism, and my desire for something outside the organization that I was part of.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Dr. Gray, would
Mhm.
you mind just sharing a little bit of your journey that led us to a life of physician entrepreneurship?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for asking. So I think for me, it started actually right around the when the pandemic was like at the beginning, at its peak, where there was all this uncertainty and like nobody knew what to expect, not just like in our institutions where we're working, but just like in society in general. Almost felt like like the end of the world. And for me, I was actually working at my dream job that I thought, a dream physician job. Like I loved what I did. And but all of a sudden, because of COVID, there were a bunch of changes happening. There were changes in the leadership at my institution, and I felt like the rug was being pulled underneath me, where my dream job all of a sudden was not that way anymore. And I didn't feel like I had autonomy at work. I just didn't feel like I was being listened to, kind of a very common narrative that I was hearing across the country with physician experiences, but that I had not felt firsthand yet. And I got to the point where I was so discouraged because I'm like, well, I could leave what I thought was my dream job and move my family again, but well, what about the next job? I mean, even if it sounds like the dream job, what if in 2 years it will become a nightmare again? And so I then came to the conclusion that, well, I should just quit medicine. It's too much to deal with. I mean, one is, being an employed physician, there are pros and cons to that. But then even private practice physicians were struggling too because of, having to negotiate with insurance companies and feeling devalued by that. So I was like, yeah, pick, if I had to pick my poison, maybe I should just leave medicine and do something where I feel fulfilled and where I feel like I could, reach my full potential. So that's what I sought out to do. I had a conversation with my husband and he's like, yeah, I'll support you in whatever you want to do. And so I started looking, and the first thing I looked for was, I was like, well, I should meet other non-physicians that are doing something. And I went to this non-medical conference for the first time in my adult life. And it was on Zoom, of course, because it was it was in the middle of the pandemic. And I didn't even know it was possible, but it was life changing. Like I didn't think your life could be changed on Zoom. I mean, this is, and but it was, and it was a conference with other financial advisors because I thought maybe I would switch into that field because it seemed like you could do that a little bit more easily by yourself than like being a private practice physician. And it was, but this conference was a chance where we were able to do life planning, which is the part that takes place before you plan financially. Because it's like, what are you saving your money for? What are you saving your money to retire? What do you actually want to do with that money? And so this life planning conference, I had a chance to really sit down and reflect on what is it that I want in my life and what's important to me? What are my goals? And it was really radical in that I mean, there was a moment when I cried in front of these 20 strangers who were financial advisors. And I because I just was able to kind of figure out what is it that I want in my life. And the funny thing that came out of this conference was at the end, I was like, you know what? I love medicine. Why can't we leave?
Mhm.
I wanted to leave. I love working with patients. I trained so hard to get to where I am, and the reason why I wanted to leave was I was trying to escape pain that I felt was kind of happening. I felt like a victim. I felt like this, leadership at my institution was making my life miserable, and I didn't want to deal with that. So one of the things I decided was I'm going to stay where I am, and I'm going to make changes here. What do I have to lose? I was going to quit anyway. I was going to quit from medicine. And so I might as well
Mm.
just stay and see what happens. And so that's what I did. And what now it's what 2, 3 years later, and I'm still at the a little bit more than 2 years later. I still work at the same job. I am so much happier. And I've started also like Dr. Lauderdale and, like all of you are saying, I also found my voice. I started not only at work, I started speaking up, but I also found my voice as a human being. And so that's, where I started podcasting on Dare to Dream Physician. And then I also, meet with physicians one-on-one and in groups and, talk to them about how do you find out what you want in your life. So this has just been such a freeing and fulfilling journey. And entrepreneurship was like kind of like the icing on the cake, where the belief that we can do whatever we want and we don't have to depend on an employer.
That's so powerful. And it's funny that when you realize what you really want is like, I love medicine. I love what I do, but I just need more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a statistic that, and I'm not sure if it's per year or just since COVID, but like 170,000 physicians are leaving medicine because of the burnout and because of just overwhelm. And like you said, just lack of fulfillment. So, and it's wonderful that you are able to find that fulfillment in physician entrepreneurship. So, Dr. Johnson, would you mind sharing with us your journey and how you led you to physician entrepreneurship?
So I just had one simple goal. My husband and I got married. We had a very hard time having kids and sustaining pregnancies. We had multiple miscarriages, and I had a couple of ectopic pregnancies. Ectopic pregnancy pretty much where the baby doesn't go into the womb, and it's not likely that's going to be viable, and it's life-threatening. And the last ectopic pregnancy that I had required emergency surgery, and I lost one of my tubes. And that was the pregnancy right before my son. And hearing that I was missing all these moments in his life, I started to question, well, why would you do all these things to bring these kids into this world and not be intentional about making time and space for them? And that was a real just gut check for me. I wanted more time with my kids. I wanted to have more freedom, and that's why I started on my journey.
Oh, wow. I love it. For more freedom, more freedom. Well, Dr. Gray, in your chapter, you talk about how you overcame a house fire, which helped you to also contribute to you being an entrepreneur. Could you share kind of how that experience kind of as well led you into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that was when I was a fellow. So that was many years before I ended up doing this journey with Dare to Dream Physician. But it was the seed. And what happened was I was a fellow. So and we had a baby in our intern year. So for in the whole training, the medical training that we were undergoing, it was just like the story of burnout, right? It was almost inevitable because we were in a new area, we didn't have help, we were first time parents, and I was a first time resident, and so I survived all the exams, all the in training, all the oral exams, and so I was like, wow, I'm a survivor. Like I did so well with everything else. And I wasn't there for, my baby's important moments because I was, either studying or at work, but I'm here. And then the moment came where we, of course, as with most house fires, it was out of the blue. All of a sudden, there was we lost everything in like a 24-hour period. Like we lost our home, we lost our possessions except for like a bag. And the wonderful thing was we didn't lose our life because we were in the house when we saw the fire, but we got out of the house. And when the actual like bad part of the fire happened, we weren't even there. We were at a friend's house because we had escaped like for the night with all the smoke that was in the house. And it was the most gut-wrenching period that I had lived up to that point, because I was blessed to not have a lot of tragedies in my life. And that I don't even think in retrospect is a huge tragedy. But at that time, it just felt like everything was just really scary. And the one thing that was so clearly came to me was, wow, what if I had died? Like, what if anybody in my family had died? Like, what then? What did I miss? And this is actually what we do in life planning, is one of the questions we do ask is, if you were to die in 24 hours, reflect on what did you not get to be? What did you not get to do? And what did I miss? And so I had that firsthand experience. And one of the things I thought was, there are things that were important to me. I sort of just pushed aside because I was trying to meet all the obstacles you have to meet as a physician. You have to pass these exams. You have to, pass attendance for residency and all of a call. But I was done with training almost. And my husband and I just had a discussion. We're like, well, you don't have to, continue on this prescribed path anymore. Like, I mean, I can be a doctor and still be part-time, right? I could like get a part-time position and not, spend 80 hours, which probably is the norm for even full-time physicians, but instead maybe work a 40-hour week. And so all of those things sort of started becoming more available when I was just able to change my perspective.
Wow. That's amazing. And that's a really good, thank you for sharing that, because that's a really good thought that we all have to kind of contemplate. Like, are we living in our genius, you know? Dr. Lauderdale, you mentioned in your chapter about how having autonomy can lead to life satisfaction. How
Mhm.
has your starting your podcast, starting your group course gave you autonomy and a purpose larger than yourself?
Yeah, so, for me, I am I practice primary care internal medicine, and I am lucky enough to work within a physician-owned and governed multi-specialty group. I'm a shareholder, I'm an equal shareholder. We vote, I'm actually on the board of my organization, and I think we're one of the best physician organizations in the country. But at the same time, especially during COVID, but even other times, but COVID brought it to the forefront. Um, I realized that my particular genius, as you put it, my particular strengths, um, overlap to some degree with my clinical work with my patients, but there are other parts of me that want to be expressed that are different than that. And there wasn't an outlet for me to do that in my organization otherwise, not at the time. And so for me, being able to do the podcast was a real way for me to sort of express my creativity, to get to talk to people who had had experiences that were different than mine, and to be part of the Entre MD community and just to see, all these people who are doing these amazing things, to get ideas and see their creativity too, um, helped me to see that I had more choices than I thought I did. And even though, if you had asked me back in, was it, June of 2021, what would things look like for me in 2023? Obviously you predict this sort of linear path, right? That you're going to follow this, and I'm going to still be doing this thing, but it's just going to be better, and that's not the way things turned out. But what did happen was there were just more opportunities, there were more choices. I've had an opportunity, I'd been asked to speak at conferences, and have met people that I never expected to meet. And I'm now, like you mentioned earlier, I started a podcast for women physicians, and I did that for about 9 months, and it was incredible. And then my mom got diagnosed with cancer that winter, and the keeping up with the content creation and all of those things got to be more than I could really do on a regular basis. And so I stopped creating new episodes in April of last year. But given the time that's elapsed since then, I've kept the option open, and I've started to dream about other things. And so now I'm like, okay, I've done this once. I can do it again. It'll be even easier the second time, right? Like having a second child. The truth is, it's just different. Just like having a second child, it's just different. But I think that's the thing for me, is just that the entrepreneurship helped me, and in community with other people, helped me to see that I had a lot more choices than I thought I had. And that improved the quality of my life immensely.
You're absolutely right. Sometimes the second podcast is easier than the first, because you know what to expect, you know what to do.
Yeah.
And now it's like the podcast you have is fun. It's fun. So it's
Right.
the Belonging in the South, a guide for misfits with a mission to help Southerners find belonging and community without changing who they truly are. So that's
Yeah.
always, if you guys hadn't checked out our podcast, check out our podcast. It sounds like a lot of fun, especially in Atlanta. We have a lot of people who are transplants. So trying to
Mhm.
engross in that Southern culture is definitely a transition.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And Dr. Johnson, you talk about how in your chapter, how you kept your dream of helping people lead healthier lives and reducing their chronic diseases, like as a secret, inside you for many years. What changed that caused you to step out of your comfort zone and kind of live in that zone of genius?
So one of the things is I have the opportunity to work part time at occupational clinic where we see first responders, police and fire. And especially during 2020, where, fire and police were on the front lines during COVID, we didn't know what was going on. And one gentleman came in and his blood sugar was elevated. And with police and fire, because you are on the front lines, you have to have a controlled blood sugar to work full time or to do, overtime. And he was just talking about the foods that he was eating and his physical activity. And most of the time, I'm just like, okay, I'm here for one job just to make sure that you're here to do this and that. But I started talking to him and he was very open, and he came back a couple of weeks later. He dropped his hemoglobin A1C, which is kind of a long-term blood sugar level. And he was really excited, and he was talking to his wife, and he'd really made plans for retirement. A lot of times with first responders, they have a very short retirement because their lifespan is shorter. And I could not fathom not telling people about this, because it makes a difference in whether someone sees their kid graduate from college or how you will spell your retirement. And so I just started telling people and talking to people, and some people wanted to hear it, and some people just, I guess, tolerated me. But I just felt like, hey, if I tell you the information and it helps you, I've done my job. So.
No, I love that. I love that. So, like, just sharing, just giving it out there to people. That's all you can do.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you, what are some obstacles that you all faced while starting your podcast or starting your physician entrepreneurship? Were there any obstacles? Or maybe just list one major obstacle you faced. Whoever, I see Welly, Dr. Gray, you unmuted. What was one of the obstacles that you faced during your journey, and how did you overcome it?
So great. Yeah, great question. I think it's very common to just have this fear of being out there, like fear of exposing ourselves to sort of like the public, right? And I think most of us in our previous life as just our normal physicians, like we tried to like, not have our addresses available in public, not, definitely don't share our phone numbers, like really not share anything on social media. And so when you get to the point where you're like, I have a message for the world. I'm on a mission and I want to change the world. I want to, improve this. All of a sudden you have to do the opposite. So, there was, there was a moment when I was listening to the EntreMD podcast, Dr. Una in the podcast said, there's a few of us out there, if that some people, just like listening to podcasts, great. Some people know that they want to start a podcast. And if that's you, then just start. And I had this like crazy moment when I felt like the radio was speaking directly to me. And so I was like, oh yeah, I think she's talking to me. Like, I think I need to just start. And, the tech part, I think, was easy. Like, you just do a little bit of research, don't dwell too much on it. Just go pick something, pick a mic, pick a program. And I mean, most of us just record on Zoom. So, all of that stuff was not that hard. But it was putting yourself out there, right? Like, oh, having my voice on the internet, that was super scary. The thought of that. And so it had to be sort of like a mindset shift. Like, it's like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? People hear your voice, people hear your thoughts. So I think it's just changing a little bit and just being like willing to just try it once. And, it's like, put that first episode out there. And don't run away, like hit publish and run away. That's okay after you hit publish to run away, and then actually share it with the world, because don't be the world's best kept secret either. And so that was just try it once. Exactly. And so that, I think, was, the advice is just to do it, just to try it at least once.
I like it. And sometimes you have to try it, and like you realize what works, what didn't work, and you keep moving forward. So Dr. Johnson, what is one obstacle you found in starting your own podcast, your own business? What was one obstacle?
So I would say what I realized is I don't have to know everything or be expert in everything. And I realized this one time, I was talking to my daughter, I was putting her to bed, and she's like, how do babies get in mommy's tummies? And I'm like, I was like completely caught off guard. And so yeah, I said something crazy like mom and dad's hug, and then they say, I love you when the baby gets in there. And she's like, that doesn't make sense. And I said, I don't know. And she was like, how do you not know? You're a doctor. And it's something I say to myself all the time. Like whenever I'm starting something, I'm like, well, how do you not know this? You're a doctor. How do you not know this? You're a doctor. And I said to her, like, it's okay. I'm a doctor, but I don't know everything. And doctors don't know everything. I'll look it up and I'll let you know. She smiled and went to bed. And for me, I have to really remember that even though I have expertise in one area, it doesn't translate to other areas. And it's okay to be a novice in one area and to start over in another area, or find somebody who is an expert. It's okay not to know everything. And if anybody knows how to tell kids where babies come from, please let me know.
Yes, we need a very quick and succinct answer, please. Post in the chat. Dr. Lauderdale, what was one of the obstacles that you faced starting your two podcasts or anything like that?
So I love what Dr. Johnson just said about not having to know everything. I think your curiosity and your interest can be the driving force. That can be the thing that brings people along with you. It can be the fact that you're a learner too. And that, for me, I know that I'm an expert at some things, but I don't really want to talk about those things. Those are the things I'm interested in. And so I don't want to pretend that I'm an expert in something I'm not, but I will, I think that saying that, I am just fascinated by this and I want to talk to people and see, what they have to say. So I love that. But one of the things for me was, kind of after I started my podcast initially, then the world started opening up. My practice got back to regular speed again, and I was concerned about time. I was concerned about having time to do it. A podcast wouldn't make me any money, and I needed to work my regular day job. And what did happen for me was through kind of watching what other people in the Entre MD program were doing with the people who had private practices and the people who are working on their kind of clinical work as their primary entrepreneurship goal. I increased my collections in my practice by like 30% that year, and over baseline before the pandemic. And I had changed from a 5-day work week to a 4.5-day work week. And this past year, like this past October, I reduced by another half day. So I work 4 days a week, or 2 half days a week, and then 3 full days. And I'm still maintaining that productivity level. And I'm not staying at my work past 4:45. And I'm picking my son up from school most days, and I'm home for dinner, like all the things that I want. And I have those 2 afternoons where I can do my creative work, and my creative work fuels my clinical work, and my clinical work fuels my creative work. And it's this beautiful, I don't want to say balance, because I think that's a myth. But it's this beautiful kind of flywheel that, you have to feel your way to. You don't know ahead of time, what the right, formula is going to be for you. And the right formula one year may be wrong for you the next. But there are ways that you can make it work. And you can get help, like if you need an audio engineer, if you need, somebody to write your show notes. I figured out how to use Loom videos and walk through everything. And I had my daughter do my social media for me the first few months of my podcast. And she did great. But there are ways that you can get help, and that you can make room for yourself.
So everybody wants to know, including myself, how did you become very efficient in clinic? What tips do you have for that? Oh, God.
Well, if you want the true answer to that?
True answer, yes.
Okay, true answer. So I had I have my practice is internal medicine. Almost all my patients are over 65. It's not technically a geriatrics practice, but it really is. And so I have patients very complex medical problems, and I'm in the practice now 7 years. And so at this point, um, it's different than it was the first 3 years where I was accepting new patients. A lot of the people were new to me. These are all people I know now. And I had really reached a point where it was reasonable for me to reduce my visit times, where I could book more patients in a day and not compromise the quality of the care that I'm giving them. And that's what I did. I reduced the time of my visit from 30 minutes to 20 for a regular follow-up. And it works for me now because I know all those people. If they were new to me, or if I'd only maybe seen them once before, that would be different. But that's one thing, I think you keep in mind that your practice will mature when you have an outpatient, like a primary care practice. Your practice will mature over time. You get more efficient, your nurses get more efficient, and your patients are more familiar. And so you really can kind of tighten the ship up a little bit every year or two. And that's what made the difference for me. And also just recognizing one of my nurses really had the capacity and the desire to do more than she was doing. So giving her more responsibility gave us more capacity.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
utilizing your team
Absolutely.
is imperative.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about some of the obstacles. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned on your journey? What is your biggest lesson that you have learned on your journey? And anyone can go next. All right, Dr. Gray, you're unmuted. What is your biggest lesson?
I think, there's so many great lessons. And this is actually why I love podcasting, because I love hearing, what other people, what their takeaways are as they go through a journey like this. But the thing is, for 2023, my word for 2023 is adventure. Like I decided that this is important to me in my life. This is a time in my life. My kid's a little bit more grown. One of my dad, who had been sick for many years, passed away last year. And so I felt like this was a time in my life where I could really pursue a venture, which has always been important to me. And as in a venture, like, how do you make an adventure? Like, how do you have an adventurous life? Like, how do you incorporate that into life? And I realized as I started, planning travels and I'm making plans, that you just have to believe that there is a venture out there. So for anybody who's, trying to live their best life, pursue their dreams, one is you have to figure out, what is it that you want, right? This is a hard question because we spent so much of our life not really honoring that, especially when you become a physician. You've sort of given up everything else that you want so that you could get the credentials. Right. So now we need to do that work. And a lot of it is introspection, but also just talking to people. Right. So figuring out, be honest, be really, really honest, and just figure out what is it that you want. And once you even get a little glimpse of what you want, start your adventure. Right. So start planning and believing that, this thing that I want, it might sound so impossible, but if you just have a little bit of a belief that, well, maybe it is possible. Let's see if it's possible. And that's where the adventure begins. This is part of pursuing your dream life. You start figuring out what you want, you start going for that, and believing that there's just going to be an incredible journey if you just let yourself start and start believing in that it's possible.
I love that. So being honest with yourself, knowing what you want, start the adventure, and just go for it. Just start. All righty. How about you, Dr. Johnson? What was your biggest lesson that you've learned on this journey?
So I completely agree with Dr. Gray. Like, when I first started, I just had so many different ideas, and I felt so paralyzed if I was going to make the wrong decision. And I think with medicine and physicians, everything is, life or death. And one of the things my sister said to me, she's like, it's not life or death. Like, just make a choice. And it was really helpful because, okay, I can go down a path, and if it's wrong, it's okay. Now I know it's wrong, and I can correct and I can pivot from there. And so I spent so much time in my head having so many discussions in my head. And now I'm just like, hey, let's go ahead and try something. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it's okay. Try something else.
I like that. Just make a choice, make a decision, and go forward. Go forward. Dr. Lauderdale, what was the biggest lesson you learned in this journey?
For me, it's a lesson that I've had to learn over and over again, and that's when I start to feel isolated and alone and like maybe I can't do this, I'm not seeking enough connection. I need to talk to somebody. I need to find somebody who's done this or find somebody who's just supportive and wants to listen, but connecting with other people. I tend toward introversion, and that's me. That's who I am. It's a good thing to be an introvert, I think. But at the same time, sometimes I have to consciously remind myself that, there are other people out here who want to be your cheerleader, who want to help you. And seeking those people out can mean all the difference.
Yeah, you're right. Having that person, they say it doesn't have to be like somebody who's done this, 10,000 years. It could be just somebody who's 6 months ahead of you who can help guide you along the way, give you some advice. So thinking about where you guys started, what advice would you give to your younger self, or maybe to somebody who's wanting to do podcasting or wanting to do entrepreneurship? What is one piece of advice you would give them on their journey? And then we'll start with you, Dr. Gray.
Okay. I just the same piece of advice, really. Just believe in yourself. That's the whole point of the book, right? Made for more. You are made for more. And you might believe that now already, and maybe you don't know what that more is. But start, just start, like we said, just figure out what is it that you want. And maybe you want like 10 things, but then right now you can think of one thing, then start with that one thing. And just go for it. And it's part of the adventure. Like Dr. Johnson is saying, it's okay. Like even if you're like, I want this, and now I'm going to start with this one decision. It's okay if it's not the right decision, because you'll figure it out. It's actually always the right decision. The right decision is always just to decide to take that next step. And it may be a windy path, and that's okay. That's part of the adventure. And it's going to be an incredible journey no matter what. But you have to start, because the thing is, if there's something in your life right now that you're unhappy with, if you sit there and do nothing, a year from now, you're going to have the same thing that you're unhappy with. So go do something about it and start with just that next step.
I like that. The right decision is always moving in the right step, or take the next step. Wow. All righty. I'm going to mix things up. Dr. Lauderdale, what is the one advice would you give to somebody starting in your shoes?
Oh, the simplest is don't make podcast art for every single episode. It's not necessary. The big thing for me is that every choice you make is changeable. And what you want isn't always apparent from the beginning. Sometimes what you want is something you feel as you go, and you can't know necessarily what you want until you get started. So you get started first. You can't think it to death. Or I guess you could think it to death. You could think it to death and then never get started. But once you get started, things begin to become more clear. It's not the other way around. And so put out a product you're proud of, but at the same time, you're going to change in what you want. The people you want to focus on may change. That niche may change. Your podcast hosting service might you might want to change. It doesn't matter. Just pick one, pick one and start, and you can change things later.
I like that. Pick one and start. Dr. Johnson, what is the one lesson, or what's the advice, you would give to somebody in your shoes starting out?
So I would say the same exact thing. I believe now that there is no shame in change. I think it was very difficult for me as a physician, because we learn how to get to a destination. we make a decision and we, like, I decided to be a doctor at age 17, and 10 years later, I'm still on the same train. And we know how to finish things. And I realize that it's okay for me to pivot. Sometimes I will look up a destination, I'll buy a ticket, I'll get on the train. And then as I get closer to the destination, I'm like, hey, I don't want to go. I don't want to go to Transylvania. Let me off. And it's okay. There's no shame in that. And it was very hard for me to learn that. And I want my younger self to know that.
I like that. There's no shame in change. If you want to get off the train, get off the train. Okay, it's okay. Um, Last but not least, where do you see? It's so funny because you talked about this, Dr. Lauderdale, that you're like, if I knew where I was going to be 2 years ago, 2 years from now, I'd be totally shocked. Where do you see your business going now in the future? Is there anything coming up for you? Where do you see your business going? And I'll start with you, Dr. Gray.
Yeah. So my mission, my business is my mission, and I sort of sprinkle into everything I do. And what I love to do is to help others live their dream, discover what it is that they want in their life, and to help them live that dream life sooner than they ever imagined. And to be sort of authentic to that mission, I have to do it in my own life. So this is this 2023. I've for me, like I said, adventure is my word for 2023. So I've designed this year so that I have lots of adventures with my families and my kids. I've overcome the fear of traveling with kids, and we're going to lots of like wonderful places, different continents, and we never did that before. And so I'm so looking forward to testing out, this is this the life of my dreams, and start living that. And I want to help others, and whether it's speaking opportunities, or continuing podcasting, working one-on-one, working in groups, being a workshop facilitator. So this is what that's my mission, and it is so much fun. And I actually do the same thing even in my physician job. I'm an employed physician, but I just try to, create a work atmosphere and a work culture that's anything that I have influence over, to help other physicians at work be happier, to help my staff be happier. And so this is what I hope to see myself doing again still in 2 years.
I love that. All right. Well, Dr. Johnson, what is your vision for your business in the future? Where do you see yourself in the future?
So, my goal, my desire is to create a place where people find healing with food, and whether it's through speaking or teaching or volunteering. I think a lot of people, like myself too, it's so much stress and frustration related to food and eating, and I believe it doesn't have to be like that. And so I want to create a place where people can eat abundantly and find health. So I'm not sure exactly how I get there, but I'm just going to keep showing up.
I love that. I love it. I'm going to keep showing up to complete the goal, to eat in abundance. Yes, yes, yes. Dr. Lauderdale, what is your vision for your business coming up in the future?
Oh, I have, so I've got these kind of two parts. I've got my clinical practice, and then this belonging in the South, whatever this is going to turn into be. And they both come from this strong desire to help people to be well, to help people to flourish. And, over the past 10 years or so, I've realized more and more that our health is so much more tied to the way that we think about ourselves and the way that we relate to other people in our relationships, um, than I ever believed that it was. And so in my clinical practice, what I hope that looks like is that my coworkers, my team, um, that we are better able to kind of see each other and work well together and function well, and kind of bring that empathy to the patients that we serve. And then in this sort of parallel way, that belonging in the South, who for people who feel like misfits for whatever reason, people who have found it difficult to flourish because of their differences, um, find in their ears something encouraging, through what I do, And whether that ends up being live events or online community or, whatever that is, I could come up with a million different ways that might manifest, but that's what I hope happens.
I love that. I love that. Well, can you tell me why somebody should buy this book? Why is reading this book important, and what can they gain from buying the Made for More book? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
So, everyone who has not gotten the book, all of you should go out there and go buy Made for More. It's available on Amazon, Kindle, any of your major bookstores. And the reason why you should buy it is because of the title, right? The title is Made for More. And I think every physician, and this book is, written by physicians for physicians, certainly still applicable if you're not a physician, but especially, from the authors, it's 47 stories of physicians who made that decision that there is more out there for them, and their version of how they started searching for it and executing it. And as you as you get a sense of, through these interviews, I don't know when we submitted our chapters, but it was probably over a year ago. And we've all have a lot of changes right now. I mean, or just like the evolution of our story, right? We're all evolving, we're all changing. But the most important thing is that we have that goal in mind, that we are not continuing to, sit there with our heads down, feeling defeated, feeling like we're victims, feeling like we have no autonomy, no power, no voice. That's really not what we're here for. We did not go to medical school and residency and take all those fancy exams so that we could sit there and have our head down and feel discouraged for 30, 40 years in our careers. And this is the beginning step. If you feel any of those feelings in any way, then go and get this book, because this will be the beginning for you. Make 2023 your best year and start your journey for more.
Awesome. And would you mind just sharing how someone can work with you?
Oh, okay. All right. So I am on most social media channels, on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can look me up either by my name, Whaley Gray, or Dream Physician on Instagram. Google me. My website is daretodreamphysician.com. And I have a weekly podcast that's on, most of the podcast apps. Just look up Dare to Dream Physician. And I would, reach out to me if you want to figure out what you want in your life and how to start living that dream life as soon as possible. Reach out to me. I love to, work one-on-one, or speak in groups to, inspire others to do the same.
And Dr. Johnson, how can someone work with you?
Also, my website is Dr. Dr. Michelle Johnson, MICHE1L Johnson.com. You always reach out there. And then also a podcast. It's Finding Peace Through Food. It's a weekly podcast, and it's super short, like 5 minutes. So it doesn't take a lot.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Dr. Lauderdale, how can someone work with you?
Yeah. So right now, the simplest way to get in touch with me would be through my podcast website, which is belonginginthesouth.com. There is a contact form on the bottom of the page. There is a form for you to sign up for my email notifications for podcast episodes. And there's also a guest nomination form. If you know someone who you think is an amazing Southerner who knows what it's like to be a misfit and still thrive anyway. I want to hear those stories. So you can nominate yourself or somebody at the guest nomination form, but that's belonginginthesouth.com. And I think there's one other Rebecca Lauderdale in the country. So you can find me on social media very easily.
All right. And I'm Dr. Alicia Shelley. You can find me at Dr. Shelley MD. And also with my podcast, I'm Back on Track, Achieving Healthy Weight Loss. Thank you all so much for participating in the Thrive for Life Live. I have, and the audience have gleaned so much knowledge and encouragement just from you sharing your stories and your advice. And once again, if you have not purchased the Made for More physicians, entrepreneurs who live life and practice medicine on their own terms, You can go to Amazon and purchase your copy. You can do Kindle and just read 47 inspiring chapters of phenomenal women who will leave you inspired, encouraged, and ready to do more. So thank you all so much for coming, and feel free to share this episode with a friend. And we look forward to seeing you all next time.